Welcome to the Berean Brotherhood.
Welcome to the Berean Brotherhood. My name is Lee. I'll be one of your hosts for the day. We're just a bunch of bros who want to talk about the Bible. Today we're talking about the closing of Planned Parenthood's flagship site in the middle of New York. Planned Parenthood has a bunch of sites all over New York State, all over the country. Again, they're the largest provider of abortions in the United States, one of the largest, if not the largest, in the world. In its 2022 to 2023 annual report, Planned Parenthood performed 392,715 abortions between October and September of 2021 and 2022. So, that's a little bit under 400,000 abortions, 400,000 murders, according to the Christian worldview, within that single year. And now, New York Times ran a bunch of articles investigating Planned Parenthood's understaffing, underfunded, misplaced IUD implants, botched abortion procedures, huge churn and turnover in the facilities, which means staff just come in and staff just leave. They complain they're never trained on anything properly. They're complaining that the culture is horrendous. And now Planned Parenthood is having a huge problem getting private donations in its stores. People are just not paying the same money they used to pay. It's never been a profitable business or a business that made a lot of money to begin with. And now they're forced to close what is probably their most front-facing site in the entire world, right in the middle of Manhattan. So Christians everywhere are celebrating this, and it is a great time to celebrate. Again, the Bible is consistent. Christianity is consistent with its view that life begins in the womb. The unborn are some of the most vulnerable and defenseless members of our society, and that Christians should be defending the unborn. But for this episode, I just wanted to go into 3 of the most popular abortion arguments that Christians will face and how you can counter them every single time in the marketplace of discussions. So 3 of the most popular abortion arguments that you're going to encounter any day. Number 1, the Bible itself does not oppose abortion. It just doesn't say it. There's nowhere in the Bible does it say anything about abortion. It doesn't oppose it. I can be Christian and support abortions. Number 2, men have no right to speak on women's affairs. No uterus, no opinion. And number 3, what I consider to be possibly the most persuasive argument, though I still think completely contradictory and unfounded, but this is probably the most popular argument that you're going to encounter on this issue, is going to be my body, my choice. It doesn't matter what any man or a person outside of me has to say. Government should not be touching my body. It's my body. It's my choice. So we're going to be addressing all 3 of these issues today. Ephesians 6:12, which says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm." 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 to 5 says, "For though we live in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh. The weapons of our warfare are not the weapons of the flesh. Instead, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every presumption set up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." Battle is not against the person standing in front of you. There are invisible forces in the Christian worldview, according to the Bible, that influence the behavior and the actions of every single human being you're going to encounter. So you have to keep this in mind. You are talking to the person in front of you. You are trying to be a defender and a representative of what the Bible talks about the world and about life and pregnancy and abortion, all these things. But our real war is against the forces that are influencing people to think that terminating a pregnancy or murdering your own child is a reasonable alternative to raising them. So try not to see the people that are standing right across you like, I can't stand this person, they're so annoying. They are not your enemy. They are a captive of the enemy. So the first argument is the Bible doesn't oppose abortion. Christians can believe in abortion and have no problem whatsoever doing it. The Bible, show me a verse where it says I cannot have an abortion. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. "I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and I appointed you as my prophet to the nations." So Jeremiah, Old Testament, automatically saying from the start, God knew who you were. He knew your entire personality. He knew your identity as a human from the womb and even before. Your value as a created being in God is before you come out of the womb. It's not determined by the subjective value judgments of people once you exit your mother's body. Psalm chapter 139, verse 13 to 16. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Again, Old Testament testifying that God understands the identity of his creation from the smallest molecule all the way up to the giant prefrontal cortex that eventually emerges. He understands who the human is that he's making in the womb, outside the womb, and afterwards. Luke chapter 1, verse 41 to 45. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. With a loud voice, she exclaimed, Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you shall bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. They're not just waiting till you slide out mommy's birth canal and telling you, well, you know what, based on what my career path is and whether or not I want to buy a new Gucci purse, we'll determine your value after the fact. No, the Bible is saying that human beings have value from the womb and even before that their value is determined by the Creator and not by whatever modern social construct just happens to be in style. The first point, the Bible does not oppose abortion. A Christian who looks at the Bible and all these verses talking about the sanctity of life, the value of human life from the mother's womb forward. If a Christian says, well, I don't see anything in there that says anything about abortion, then don't question their sincerity, but question how honest they are with the Bible and with scriptural text, and how serious they are about their faith if they're willing to ignore what the Bible says about the unborn and the value they have. Point number 2, men have no right to speak on women's affairs. No uterus, no opinion. This is a funny one. And I mean, it's a quick kill. But if they happen to be a modern, progressive, anti-biblical person, someone who doesn't have any Christian values, doesn't believe anything about it, believes that, for example, gender is a social construct, that male and female don't exist, blah, 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 then, I mean, men have no right to speak on women's affairs is irrelevant. It makes no sense. If male and female are just social constructs, according to their view, and if men now can get pregnant whenever they want, you don't have to have a uterus to be a man according to 2025 cultural standards, then it's meaningless to say that men can't speak on this issue. I could very easily be a man if I identify as it, or a woman if I identify as it, and I could speak about any issue I want because sex and gender are just social constructs. If men can have uteruses, according to them, then the critique, only people with uteruses can talk about it, is invalid. Anyone could identify as whatever they want. So if descriptors and categories of sex and biological framework are meaningless, then so is the criticism. Only people from this gender can talk about this issue. It makes no sense. It's completely contradictory. Take a clown nose, put it on the person who's making this argument, and ask them to go along with their day. Say sayonara. Now, the second, more complicated version of only people with uteruses can talk about abortion. If you're a man, you should have no opinion, has a little more grit and it's a little tougher to dismantle, but it still falls to the same kind of contradictions. Remember, the point is that they're trying to make is that if you are not a female, you cannot talk about female issues. And the foundational belief underneath that is if you are not this specific biological thing, then you cannot talk about the experiences of that thing. This argument would invalidate every single aspect of human experience if it were followed. Think about it. Most men throughout history have been architects and engineers. Most systems and institutions of power that modern feminism and anti-biblical ideas would like to take control of are patriarchal, male-dominated institutions. If it were true that only a person from a specific gender can talk to issues of that gender, then the entire feminist movement contradicts itself and invalidates itself. How could a woman go into a male-dominated sphere and offer criticism or advice if only men can talk about men's issues? On top of that, this just doesn't apply to literally anything in humanity. Could you imagine if you had to be a category of something to share experiences with that thing? That means baseball players could only talk to baseball players, engineers could only talk to engineers, clerks could only talk to clerks, and women could only talk to women. But instead, the human experience has a bunch of overlap and a bunch of different emotions and feelings and information that both men and women, according to the Bible, are encouraged to speak with each other about. Well, finally, the part that I find kind of hilarious and that I get the most kind of chuckles out of is, if this is true, no uterus, no opinion, then that means that the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision is illegitimate. The entire federal foundation of the abortion argument gets thrown into the garbage. Because remember, Roe versus Wade in 1973 was decided by an all male majority of Supreme Court justices. Even the dissenting justices who were against Roe versus Wade were males. It was all men. So does that mean that abortion has no federal standing because men can't talk about abortion issues? Ah, I see. They can talk about it just when they support it, right? Arguments don't work like that. It's completely contradictory. If only people with uteruses can talk about abortion issues, then Roe versus Wade should not exist, and there's no legal reason to follow it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it gets even more ironic and kind of silly when you remember that in 2022, the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization, that decision was decided by male and female judges, which means, think about it. The decision decided by men and women to overturn Roe versus Wade should have higher legal standing than the decision to create Roe versus Wade, because that one was decided by all men and the other was decided by both men and women. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 12 says, "Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so also man is born of woman. But everything comes from God." So you can't create men without woman and their genetic material and their bodies and their social support and their emotional support. And you can't do that either without men. You just can't create any living human beings. So yes, men come from women. This is true, but women also come from men. And First Corinthians says everything comes from God. They're not independent of each other. The Bible just completely destroys this no uterus, no opinion, or if you don't have testicles as a man, then you can't talk about male things, because the Bible says that men and women were designed to help and share experiences with each other. They were designed with very different vulnerabilities and very different strengths, but together form the perfect unit in service to each other and to God. Finally, the most popular argument that you've probably heard of, that everyone's heard of 3 million times, is the my body, my choice argument. So this argument admittedly is true, 100% true, if the premises of it are true. So if my body, my choice's premises is it is only the body of the woman being affected, then it should 100% be the choice of the woman in question. The problem is every single piece of scientific information we have about human life tells us that it is not the woman's body by herself, but that life begins at fertilization, aka conception. So the premise of this statement is completely false. It is not just the body of the woman in question. It is the body of the woman and a separate human developing inside of her that this entire controversy surrounds. Virtually every biologist on the planet with an actual reputation and credentials agree that life begins at conception. From the American College of Pediatricians, the predominance of human biological research confirms that human life begins at conception, fertilization. At fertilization, the human being emerges as a whole, genetically distinct, individualized, zygotic living human organism, a member of the species Homo sapiens, needing only the proper environment in order to grow and develop. The difference between the individual in its adult stage and its zygotic stage is one of form, not nature. Even if the stage of development that the human is at is very early, it is still a developing human being. A paper written by Stephen Andrew Jacobs called "The Scientific Consensus on When a Human's Life Begins" goes on to state, and you can look this up on NIH anytime you'd like, Biologists from 1,058 academic institutions around the world assessed survey items on when a human's life begins, and overall, 96% affirmed the fertilization view. 96% of scientists agree that at conception, at fertilization, not 6 months in, not 8 months in, not 2 months in, 96% agreed that at conception, when the father's genetic material meets the mother's genetic material and they fuse at that moment, that is when a distinct individual human life has begun. Just like you wouldn't say a 4-year-old or a toddler was less human than an adult, even if those humans are at different developmental periods in their lives, 96% of scientists agree, not theists, not Christians, not religious fanatics, scientists agree that life begins at conception. It is completely nothing more, my body, my choice, than propaganda that is anti scientific. Period. Full stop. It is completely anti scientific. Adolf Hitler is directly quoted as saying about the Jewish people, the Jew was only and always a parasite in the body of other peoples. The Jews are a people under whose parasitism the whole of honest humanity is suffering. He wrote this in Mein Kampf. You'll notice a lot of times when people talk about a group of political opponents or religious opponents or social opponents, they will use language like parasites, dehumanizing language. They're nothing more than viruses. And I feel that I've seen a lot of pro choice advocates, especially the most extreme ones, compare the innocent human life inside of a woman during pregnancy to a parasite, to some type of vulture or just disgusting invader of the body, instead of the God given gift and responsibility that all parents should guard closely. My favorite, most recent conversation on this was between Catholic apologist speaker Trent and YouTuber Destiny. They're both very articulate, very well spoken. You can catch that right here. We're going to link it down beneath in the video description. Excellent debate, especially goes into the consciousness of children during pregnancy and why that's such a horrible reason to justify killing the child in the womb. So that's an excellent debate. There are probably a lot of other channels that are going to dive a lot deeper into it than this little segment. We plan on going into it a lot more, especially in later episodes, the problem of consciousness and why that just completely obliterates the abortion pro-choice argument. But if I could leave you some final words from the good book itself, 1 John 3:16 says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." And this is why the Bible and the Christian worldview, the teachings of Jesus Christ, are so powerful in dismantling so many of these kind of weak, propaganda-based, spurious arguments for abortion. We're not here to call the people involved in abortions demons and just psychopaths. This is a complicated social issue. It's a complicated issue of abandonment, especially by the men who forsake their responsibilities to protect their children and the woman that they're supposed to love. There's so many moving parts and there's so many wounded people at the heart of abortion. The life of the child being innocently, murderously taken away, the life of the mother who's impacted in permanent ways that no abortion propaganda piece will fairly cover. This is a deep, complicated issue, and Christians everywhere should be prepared to extend compassion to people at the heart of this issue, especially to women, especially to those brave enough, no matter what the media tells them or what the world tells them, to protect the lives of their sons and daughters and see that pregnancy to its end. So Christians should definitely be compassionate towards the people at the heart of these issues. It's not just a talking point you just talk about as if it doesn't affect anybody. But at the same time, we need to be vigilant and well prepared so that when this debate comes back and rears its ugly head again, Christians are prepared to give a biblical answer to some of these weak, frail arguments that for too long have tricked people into thinking the lives of the innocent should not be protected. This is the Berean Brotherhood. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below. Hit that subscribe button. We love you. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.